But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, which means twin in Greek, which is called Didymus, so I guess Thomas had a twin somewhere, was not with them when Yeshua came. I heard someone say Thomas, it could have been called the twin because every one of us is kind of like Thomas in one way. He's in some sense the twin of us all. All of us have a tendency to, on one hand, we believe and we proclaim, and on the other hand, we question and we doubt. So the other disciples in verse 25 were saying to him, "We have seen the Lord," but he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the imprint of the nails, and put my finger into the place of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." And after 8 days, the disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them, and Yeshua came, the doors having been shut. Now, it's kind of interesting, this phrase, the doors having been shut. It's repeated. It's kind of a bit of a clue that it tells us a little bit about the nature of this new body that Yeshua has. The doors have been shut, and you can imagine, I don't know if this is stone or what, but there's no way to get inside, but somehow Yeshua is able to get inside. Now, that's kind of interesting. But we know that it's an actual physical body. Does it not follow the laws of nature? Does it not follow the laws of physics? I don't know. It's kind of interesting. But I love here that 8 days later, by the way, according to a Jewish rendering of time, the very day of something taking place could be considered the first day. This is probably, again, Sunday evening. This is also another Sunday evening. It's interesting, this is a side note, but in early church history, we read, Tacitus, as the Roman historian, he's dialoguing with Hadrian, which is right around the turn of the first into the second century. He complains about Christians in Rome, and he says they do this, they get up early before the sun comes up on a particular day of the week, and they worship Christ as a god, and they make their blood offerings to him, and they have their love feast. And of course, possibly alluding back to, because what does it say in the early part of John's gospel? It says that Yeshua rose before the sun had come up, right? And then it says, then they break and they go, Cassius says that they broke and then they went away to work, and then they would come back that evening and they would have another feast on Sunday evening. And so we know that the Romans are recognizing, again, not a Shabbat. I think for the early Jewish believers, they were doing Shabbat, but I think that there was also something that they were doing to recognize Yom Rishon, the first of the week, as a significant event in the life of the body of Messiah, that Yeshua rose again from the grave. You know, it's interesting. If you think about the symbolism of Yom Rishon, of the first of the week, Shabbat is really what? If you think about back to Genesis and you look at Genesis chapters 1 through 2-3, we see the 7 days of creation there. And we read about the Shabbat. Well, Judaism oftentimes saw that as a kind of a prophetical, and even the early church saw that as a prophetical pattern for humanity. Millennia 1, Millennia 2, Millennia 3, Millennia 4, and that in the 7th millennium, the Messiah would come and would bring in this era of peace. And then after that, there is what's called the Olam Haba, the world to come. And for many of the early Christians, they referred to it as the 8th day. Sunday was referred to as the 8th day. I think this kind of gives us a little bit of I know I'm digressing quite a bit, so to kind of track with me here, but I think this kind of gives us a little bit of a foreshadowing as to why possibly Sunday became a big day on the calendar for many early Gentile Christians that were not necessarily Jewish as it continues to develop into the 2nd century. Nevertheless, again, there's evidence that for many of the early Jewish believers, they still did Shabbat, obviously. That's never questioned, but then they possibly did something on Yom Rishon to recognize Yeshua's resurrection. But the beauty of all of this with Thomas, I love that Yeshua reenacts this setting just for Thomas. He comes back just for Thomas, so that Thomas can see. You see, in Yeshua's mind, it was very important that the entirety of the inner circle would see Yeshua together, not just as individuals, but together, that they would see the risen Lord. And that's important.